This is a short presentation. We've got a nice commitment that we've put together around the bilateral connection agreement. First things first, I'll just describe, for those of you that may not be aware, what a bilateral connection agreement, BCA, is. So a bilateral connection agreement is the industry standard document that's contained in Schedule 13 of the DCUSA document. Any connections for companies who are parties of the Distribution Connection Use of Systems Agreement, DCUSA, would use this. It's for all connection activities. These will be predominantly IDNOs that have requirement to be connected to Electricity Northwest's distribution network. And most of these IDNO connections will be things like LV extensions to E&W's network or E&W HVRMU, LV cabinets, that type of thing. These agreements just record and document the interface between the IDNO and the DNO network. Thank you, Amy. Next slide. So why do we put so much importance on the BCA document? Well, Electricity Northwest is an asset owner, and the BCA records the point of interface between E&W and IDNO network, and it defines things such as the agreed maximum load and accurate information. Because we're an asset owner, is essential for management and maintenance of our assets. So we do play and put a lot of importance on the accuracy of these documents. Thank you, Amy. So our ICE commitment, as I said, we put in committed to this year, was that we will proactively engage with our stakeholders, such as yourselves today, to review the BCA process and to keep our stakeholders informed of any changes. The first thing we're going to do to meet that commitment is to look to obtain feedback from our stakeholders and perform an internal review, look to identify areas for improvement and share any proposals with stakeholders, which is exactly what we'll be doing in a moment, and then look to implement and embed those process improvements. So hopefully some of you may have participated in a questionnaire that we sent out in August. The questionnaire went out to all our stakeholders, and there was a number of questions. It was only a short questionnaire, but it was a number of questions that got to the heart of the BCA process. I won't go through them all in detail. I have documented the answers on the next 2 or 3 slides, but we'll just go through them and pick out the highlights. So the first question we asked is what your current view of the BCA process was, and as you can see here, 30% thought it was very good and 30% thought it usually works for me. So overall, around 60% thought the process was potentially fit for purpose, but the more concerning thing was the 40% that thought it doesn't always work and it could do with an improvement. Thank you, Amy. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all these in details, but in a nutshell, if we look at the left-hand pie charts here, this is all around the timescales for production of design approvals and to have the returned signed BCAs back to the IDNOs. And overall, you can see the numbers there suggested that we very rarely provide the BCAs with any sort of timescale that either the ICP or the IDNO, whoever the stakeholder was, timescales that they were comfortable with. And the right-hand slides there, just some questions around the actual format, the look and content of the BCA, and a question there around whether we should make the documents available for self-serve. I think the important thing on that one to show is that there was a 40% of stakeholders agreed that it should be self-serve. Another 20% thought it might be a good idea, but just not at the moment. And 30% actively disagreed, with 10% abstaining. One last question on the questionnaire was, if we just had to choose one change to the process, what would have the biggest positive impact on yourselves? And you can see overwhelmingly 70% of stakeholders suggested that it was around timescales following design approval. So the actual creation and delivery of a BCA document that could be signed by the IDNO. Okay, so as I said, what does the results tell us? Well, 60% thought the process works most of the time, but 40% only some of the time. So clearly an area for improvement. Timescales are really, really important to all stakeholders. That was evident with the results of the survey. Responses suggested that the existing timescales are inappropriate to the process, and that includes not just the creation of the BCA, but also the returned B&W signed BCA back to the stakeholders. Some thought that the BCA was only part of the energisation process and didn't really understand it or got themselves too concerned. It was just a way of them getting their energisation. That suggests, because we had quite a few that answered in that manner, that quite a number of stakeholders potentially don't understand what the document's for or its importance and significance. So clearly we've got some work to do there as well. There is some interest in making the BCA self-serve, and clearly one of the most important things to come out of it was the document should be available within the shortest possible time period following design approval. Thank you, Amy. So what are the areas we've identified specifically that we need to concentrate on? Well, I think the survey shows that there's potentially a lack of knowledge and understanding of the BCA document itself and its requirements. There's clearly no defined or agreed SLAs with our stakeholders. It's unclear what those are, what timescales should look like. It's difficult to determine a clear starting point for any SLA that we do introduce, because quite often design approval isn't the appropriate time. There's still issues outstanding, such as have all the legal clearances been met, the IDNO substation name and number have been provided, that type of thing. Disconnect between the design approval process and the contracts process, that was an internal issue that was identified as part of the feedback, that sometimes the contracts team weren't aware of what the design approvers had done, so clearly again work needs to be done in that area. There were delays with the IDNOs providing some of the information, such as I've said before, such as their name and number of the sub, and there's quite often changes to the original requirements that require additional design submissions, so that would also cause a delay in potentially delay in the production of the BCAs. And I think if we hold our hands up, there's the main focus of the design approval process has been to meet our regulatory obligations, and occasionally the BCA has suffered as a result of that due to workloads. So again, that's something that we need to investigate and improve. Thank you, Amy. So, getting on to the proposal. So, the proposal is how we're going to resolve this, make life hopefully easier, and introduce some service levels for this. Is we internally use a number of BCA templates that we've created over the years, and the proposal is that we publish these templates on our external website, make them available to ICPs, and give them the opportunity to complete them and submit them with their design submission. The advantage of that, if we go through the proposal in a bit more detail, so if you do submit your template with your design submission, then we can review that template as part of the design approval process. If you're unable or don't provide a completed template at design submission, then we will provide a partially completed template back to yourselves within 5 days, within 5 working days of design approval. And then as a result of that, ENW will commit to provide the BCA back to yourselves with full signature within 10 working days of whichever the latter is of the receipt of a completed template or design approval. So, if it's submitted, just as an example, if it's submitted with your design submission on design approval within 10 working days of your design approval, you will receive your BCA for signature. If we complete the BCA or it comes in later, at a later stage after design approval, within 10 working days of receipt of that completed template, we will commit to provide you with your BCA for signature. Oh, sorry, Amy, just go back to there. Just ever so slightly, thank you. So the important thing there is that we must have the completed template at least 10 working days prior to a submission of an energisation request, just to give us time to get the BCA back to you so that you can then provide it back to us signed, and give us opportunity to sign and return prior to energisation. So please make sure the template's in at least 10 working days prior to your submission of energisation request. And then we will equally commit to sign and return your completed signed BCA within 10 working days of receipt. Nothing changes on the mailbox where those signed contracts should be sent. Still into the contracts mailbox. Thank you, Amy. So just to summarise what I've been through today and to go through the next steps. So as I've said, the BCA is a very important document to Electricity North West and the IDNOs, but you know, certainly to us, it's an important document, and it's really essential that we have accurate information on our network and those interfaces with IDNOs. We've reviewed the BCA process with stakeholder feedback, and we have identified several inconsistencies as we've discussed. So we've proposed some improvements and that we've just discussed, and we intend to apply those proposed improvements and the new process to all designs submitted after the 30th of September this year. So from the 1st of October, we will publish the templates on our external website. If you complete those and provide them with your design submission, as I said, we can review it as part of the design submission process. Alternatively, we will provide you with a partially completed template within 5 working days following design approval. And then I think it's only right if we introduce something new that we review how things are going. So we're going to put a follow-up review, follow-up stakeholder feedback sometime in Q4 between January and March. So just looking at those next steps. To get us prepared, there's been quite a lot of activity behind the scenes. Myself and Martin have been furiously getting up to date, making sure we sign and return any outstanding bilateral connection agreements that we're awaiting signature by Electricity North West. Those lists are just about clear and we're up to date. With only the very latest still requiring signatures. We're going to publish the templates as I've discussed and make them available on the Connections Contracts webpage. And the BCA, if possible, should be provided at design submission. Okay, thank you for that. So, on the subject of design submission, we did a little review again of the design submission pack and the process, and a review of the actual design approval process as well. So this follows on very nicely from the previous topic. So as you should all be aware, following acceptance of a connection offer, the ICP yourselves will submit your design for approval by one of our design approval engineers. The design submission pack should typically include the schedule of works to be delivered, including any phases, the approved design and plan, the adoption plan, which specifically highlights the areas of land ownership along the cable route, the asset values, costs, and details of any legal consents that are required. And as you'll be aware, Electricity North West have 10 working days to either approve or reject the submitted design. And then following design approval, Electricity North West will provide the ICP with a site-specific bilateral adoption agreement that requires signature by the developer and the ICP prior to energisation. The adoption agreement records all the information in the design submission and provides Electricity North West with an indemnity on the adopted cables for a period of 2 years. So what are some of the issues with the current design approval process? Well, there's certainly, from my investigations, quite often a lack of clarity and understanding of what should be included in a design submission pack. I know Dylan and Jason are on the call. Not exactly including you in that. I know some of the design submissions I've seen from yourselves are very good, but some other ICPs do struggle with the information that needs to be presented in a design submission pack. And as you'll be aware, you know, it's sometimes a learning curve. If there's omissions from the design submission pack, it risks the design being rejected, which obviously causes things such as the need to submit multiple design submissions. It creates frustration for the ICP for the rejections, and for the E&W design approvers with going through multiple submissions for sometimes very simple designs. That then creates delays in design approval, which creates delays in producing the adoption agreement, which then potentially creates delays in delivery of your project. So some of the potential improvements that we've been considering are to first of all, try and increase the awareness of the minimum information required at design submission, just to try and reduce the number of delays and rejections just down to simple data emissions. We're going to look to simplify the design submission template to assist ICPs with this. We're going to look to provide specific guidance to support the design submission template, improve the and simplify the quality of and any onboarding material on the website, which can also potentially be used for refresher training for new recruits, new design staff into ICPs as well. We're going to ensure that we continue to develop a consistent and fair approach to the design approval process. We now regularly talk to our design approvers, talk through some of the common issues, and make sure that we provide common, fair, and consistent responses on a number of design submissions. We're going to look to publish some feedback on what those common design submission errors are, just as a point of learning. There are some very common occurrences. If they're common, that's because people are obviously not understanding what needs to be submitted. So that goes back to the first point on this slide. And then we're going to try and, or we will, produce the adoption agreement in a timely manner following design approval. So how are we going to do this? What's our proposal? Well, I think my interpretation of the design submission pack is that it's quite a lengthy document, and even though it may help people in some respects, I think it sometimes goes into far too much detail, and it's probably a little bit unwieldy and is rarely used. So to that end, we propose to retire the existing design submission pack. To replace it, we're looking at introducing a simplified bilateral adoption agreement template that will be available, currently is available on our website. And our proposal is that the bilateral adoption agreement is submitted as the design submission. So if you complete the template as it's laid out on our website, provide that to us as your design submission, then we will review not only the documentation within it, but that will also have the effect of creating the bilateral adoption agreement and having it reviewed at that design submission and design approval process. To get round the issue of outstanding consents prior to energisation, those consents will be caveated out in the bilateral adoption agreement template, just to a promise that they will be provided at a later date if required. The beauty of this proposal is that once you've got your design approved, you will also have your bilateral adoption agreement for signature available to you on day 0 of receipt of the Form B, and any subsequent design revisions can be provided again on the next version of the BAA, the approved BAA. So we just subsequent design submissions, any changes to the design are just submitted on the your approved bilateral adoption agreement under the next version. That gives us the beauty as well, is that it helps us track, record and manage where the bilateral adoption agreements are from design submission, and we can in turn introduce a simplified transparent process behind the scenes. We should have reduced any conflicts or misunderstandings of where the adoption agreement is in that approval process.